Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Did you notice Pastor Jack? You all listen. I'm going to try to figure this out. Stay right there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, but that's okay. Okay, good morning again. We know that Pastor Jackson is right in the perfect place, and we miss him and we love him. We're so happy that we can be here today and share the love of God. So I'm Barbara Simone, and today I'm going to follow what Pastor Jack has started for this month. It was about power. And it was the disciple Philip about growth. Where do you get your power? So as I meditated on the idea of power, the first thing that came to me was the power of our belief in our God identity. I'm going to say that again. The power of the belief of our God identity. Who we believe we are is where so much power resides. So I am going to be a little bit following Pastor Jack, because Pastor Jack likes to do some radical things and give us some teachings, right? So I'm going to give some new thought teaching today. Okay, so because you know we're a teaching church, I think that's what we say. And I'm a teacher, I can't help it. Okay, so the thought that I want us to really contemplate is that there is no power when we say, I am a S-I-N-N-E-R. The belief in us being a sinner really takes away the power of our Christ consciousness to be who you really are. Now, I'm going to give you a new thought definition of sin. Now remember, Reverend Ike was a new thought pioneer. Way ahead of his time, he blessed millions of people. He's blessing us now here at his church, which is still amazing for you to believe. But I'm going to read to you the definition of sin, just to think. Just put this on today and see how you feel. Just say it. New Thought says, the original meaning of sin was simply to miss the mark of spiritual perfection. We teach that sins are mistakes, and that anyone can turn away from making mistakes and begin doing things differently. We believe that as we sow, so shall we reap. And we know that's a Bible verse. Meaning that our sins have consequences, and these consequences are not arbitrary. There are universal laws underlying the universe, and when we stay in alignment with the laws, we are successful. If we violate the laws, there are negative results, cause and effect. Thus we teach it is best to live consciously through compassion and love God with all heart and soul, and love your people, neighbor as yourself. So, last statement, some people also contemplate. We are not punished for our sins, but by them. So, if you make a mistake, you get the effect. Your belief of who you are. Jesus taught us what divine spiritual means, the one with the Father. That's a real powerful belief. The belief that we're sinners takes that away from us. Now, I'm going to read you a Bible story. As I read the Bible story, I want you to just think about all the characters in it. And who do you think is clear about who they are and who is not? It's from John, chapter 8, and I'll start with verse 1. Jesus went into the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, then they said unto him, Master, this woman is taken in adultery, the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? By the way, I'm reading King James. I love King James. I have all different versions of the Bible. Like for some reason I always magnetize back to King James. This they said, tempting him, that they might not accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he hadn't even heard him. So when they continued asking, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin, we're going to say it in the synagogue, among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted of their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none of the woman, he said unto her, Women, where are those thine accusers? Has no one condemned thee? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Now, we're going to look at that scene now. I want you to think about that scene. We've got the loving master, unconditional love in the flesh, just there. We've got the scribes and Pharisees, and we've got your Magdalene. And we know that in that scene, it was only Jesus who knew who he truly was. Now, I'm going to take real fast. I'm going back to Ernest Holmes, who talks about Jesus, and I'm just going to read very briefly what he says. Jesus never thought himself as different from others. His whole teaching was that what he did, others could do. He located God and the kingdom of heaven within himself. He had plunged beneath the material surface of creation and found its spiritual cause. This cause he called God the Father. And Ernie wrote, Jesus stands alone as a man who knew himself and was cognizant of his relationship to the perfect whole. And that scene, Jesus knew who he was. He was clear, but that's not all he knew. He knew who the scribes and Pharisees were. He knew who Mary Magdalene was. He knew that they were divine spiritual beings who all just made a mistake. That's all that happened. He did not say, you're going to go somewhere for what you did. He didn't say you're bad and wrong. He didn't make anybody wrong. And that was the absolute power that Jesus shows us when we think and we know that, yeah, we can make a mistake, but we're not less than the love and divinity of God. And as we go on with that story, he said, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And he continues to say, Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. So we get caught up in self-judgment. If we think that we're sinners, we're just going to judge ourselves. And you know what? I like. As soon as we start judging ourselves and beating ourselves up, where can we find God? We go to Jesus, and Jesus is going to remind us to go within. But it's so easy to start looking at yourself as less than divine when we think that we've entered that kingdom of sin. We're living in the kingdom of God, and we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we all make mistakes. To love ourselves unconditionally is the highest form of self-expression, and which I believe is the highest form of power. If you want to feel that power that we're talking about this month, it is that unconditional love, but not just for you, it's for everyone in the world. That is a high calling. Now, I'm going to read something from It's from the chapter called You Are Your Self-Awareness. Now that's a really cool, just think about that. That's a good chapter title, right? You are your self-awareness, which means who you are is just basically who you think you are. You are who you think you are. And all the time. So that's why it's so important to remember that we are theologically. One of the prophets in the Bible said, let the weak say, I am strong. Let's talk about these mystical words, I am. Whatever you add to I am, that is what you become. That's why I'm against anybody teaching the so-called poor people to say, I'm poor. We know that it's become somewhat popular, it's become somewhat style, it's cliche, if you're pleased to say poor people. Define yourself as prosperous. When you say I am poor, that is your self-definition, and it goes on and on. But I challenge us, because I'll challenge myself with this one. We know we don't say I am poor, no matter what. But now, we're going to go feed the poor people. Okay, so this is where we really want to work in our consciousness. We are not feeding poor people. We are feeding people. We are feeding divine spiritual beings who are experiencing poverty, who have a belief in it. And we are so guided to give money, to give help. Of course, we're going to be filled with compassion. But there is no such thing, according to what we know for true, of a poor person, someone experiencing poverty, someone experiencing sickness. So again, the power with the self-recognition of who you are. When Reverend Pete and I became, it's called practitioners in our organization, we didn't get a license to actually pray for people. And we would take on clients. And you get to take tests and things like that. And how we were trained is someone would come up to us with a condition or a circumstance. And what we would have to do is help them uncover, we call it a false belief. A false belief meaning, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, he doesn't love me, and all of that stuff. So we would help them uncover the false belief that was causing the condition, reminding them that the truth of himself was health, was power, and things in that realm. So you can start training your mind to get very clear that your true nature is so divine, is so magnificent, and to let go of the old way of looking at sin and just knowing that we all make mistakes. And that's good, that's fine. But can you love yourself? Remember at the beginning when we all loved yourself? Who were you loving? See, we know that we grow, so hopefully every Sunday, as we love ourselves, we feel that connection to Christ. We feel that connection to God. And as the layers unfold, it gets clearer and clearer that no, I don't see one sinner in this room. I see beautiful souls of light, just like me, who do silly things once in a while. And I'll start beating myself up. Wait, no. If Jesus, the light of God, did not condemn, but allowed people. Remember he said, don't do it again. He basically told Mary Magdalene, just go and sin no more. Don't make the same mistake. That's all. We can say that to ourselves. Just don't do that again. Now we may do it again, because we've all done that, but that's okay. Just don't do it again. So that's my rebellious teaching this morning about who our God identity is and how we're going to let sin go away. And in this church, it is certainly is a vibration of that Christ that was in Jesus that is so, you can feel here. And that's why I am so happy and so grateful and honored to be up here this morning and to share this talk with you. And here comes Reverend Pete. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Parker. I'm going to try this mic. It's already on? Perfect. Okay, I want to make sure you can hear me. Can you see me? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Just wanted to be sure. Okay, you said that we were a little short this morning. Huh? Thanks a lot. I've been giving that my whole life. God, no respect. Okay. Well, Reverend Bob Graham was talking about sin and about self, but I want to go to something even more basic. And the basic question that I'm starting with for everybody here is really asking you the question, what do you believe about God? I mean, we say when you walk in where God meets God, we talk about turning to God for this and God for that and blah, blah. What do you believe about God? And there's no one answer or, quote, right answer, because everybody has their own personal thoughts and beliefs, because everyone has their own personal relationship with God. Now, I want you to consider that what you believe about God has everything to do with your experience of life. Okay? What you believe about God has a big impact on your experience of life. And of course, as you grow from a small child to an adult, your concept of God might change, and of course your experience of life would change. I was born and brought up Catholic. So as a Catholic boy going to Sunday school, I was taught that God was judge, jury, and executioner. And I learned to fear God. And that I had to go to the priest and ask for forgiveness, and if I said the right prayers, then I got a clean slate and start all over again. But that, and you had to promise that you would not commit the same sin. As a matter of fact, just to tell you a little story, when I was in 9th grade, I started smoking cigarettes because I wanted to look cool. Okay? So I was smoking, and one of the things they taught me in the Catholic Church was that you're supposed to be sorry for your sins. But I wasn't sorry that I was smoking. And I knew that if I'd gone to confession and confessed that I was smoking, I could leave and have another cigarette. And I was disobeying my parents, who told me, don't smoke. And of course, disobeying your parents is a big sin. So I figured I was lost already, okay? And I was gone for like 12 years, I smoked. And that was it. And then after I quit, which was, by the way, on March 23rd, 1980, remember the day, after I quit, I eventually went back to the church. And I told the priest, I haven't gone to communion, and I've been sinning, for 12 years and all that. And he said, blah, 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 you're forgiven. I was like, what? What is all this? What sort of God are you talking about that, can let me do all these bad things and then forgives me for it? Something didn't make sense to me. Now, I tried to get more information about God, and I was taught that God was the three O's. God was omnipresent, present everywhere, or as we would say, there's not a spot where God is not. Omniscient, meaning all-knowing, and omnipotent, all-powerful. There's a great line that's in A Course in Miracles. It starts out saying, nothing real, with a capital R, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Know this and know the peace of God. And it's true. If only God is real and God is all-powerful, nothing real can be threatened. That's when Jesus said, peace be with you. That's what he's talking about. That was his idea of God. And there are other ideas about God that people have general agreement with. Things like God is eternal, God is changeless, God is infinite. Were any of you taught the idea about God being omniscient and omnipotent and omnipresent? Well, I'm going to propose another idea about God that is very radical, especially amongst people who have a Christian background. So hold on to your seat. I'm going to ask you a question. And this is a real dividing line, believe it or not, that I'll go into. Is God all-loving? Is God omnibenevolent? Does God love all of us? Does God love all of us equally? Does God love all of us unconditionally? I mean, I'd like to think that in spite of my actions, God still loved me. But, there's a lot of confusion, I think, around it. I mean, we've all heard that God is love. Jesus has said to love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, love your enemies, to love unconditionally. Paul to the Galatians says the entire law is summed up in the single command, love God, neighbor, and yourself. And we all heard in Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, And even though there's faith, hope, and love, the greatest is love. However, if you read the Bible, there's also plenty in there that talks about God's will, God's law, punishment for the sins, God's wrath. In other words, what I would label as a judgmental God. That's the God that I knew when I was in Sunday school. And that's not just in the Old Testament. There was a time in the New Testament when Jesus had given the parable about the weeds. Remember the farmer, he sows his good seed, and the thief comes in the night and has weeds, and he throws it in, and so they start to grow back up, and the farmer says, well, let them all grow, and when they finally reach the time, we will just take them all, separate them out. And the apostles asked him, Jesus, what did you mean by that parable? And this is in Matthew, it's Matthew 13. He said, well, the Son of Man will send out his angels. They will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Remember hearing that? The weeping and gnashing of teeth, the blazing fire? How could a God who punishes me for my sins be a God of unconditional love? The two just don't seem to go together. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen written, and for me, whenever I have a question like that, I go to the internet, because the internet is the source of all information and all knowledge. I mean, that's where all the divine wisdom can be found. So when I went to the internet, this is what I found, and this is not Islamic terrorists that are writing this. These are good Christians, and so this is what they said. When I looked up the idea about God being all love, more people will go to hell because they believe God is only love than you can possibly imagine. The Bible never claims God is all loving, so if that's what your impression of Christianity is, there's no wonder that you're confused. This is the internet telling me this. Love is the best known but the least understood of God's attributes. We must recapture some of the holy terror that comes with a right understanding of God's righteous anger. These are Christians who honestly believe this. Now, as we know, there are other writings that you can get, and you can just go to the Bible as well. In Matthew, Jesus talked about unconditional love. You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's what he means by missing the mark. Missing the mark in terms of sin is anything that would take us away from our connection with Spirit. Paul said, for I am persuaded, this is in Romans, I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, or any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God. So how can we have such a conflict? How can we have a God that destroys cities, says, I am a jealous God, follow these commandments or you will be punished? How can that be free will? If you do this thing, you go to heaven, you do this, you go to hell. That's one God, and you can find that in the Bible, and it is a God of love. I think Pastor Jack has talked about the Bible. I know one time he said something to the effect of, you've got to find yourself in the Bible. And if you look just as a general idea from the Old to the New Testament, it's a growing up in consciousness of what people's belief and idea of God is. And it starts out with a very primitive idea of a God of fear. And that's where the original idea of God came from. Anything that humans could not explain, they attributed to God or the gods. And the God of fear is what you see in the Old Testament. The New Testament, Jesus brings out the God of love. And it can be explained in an idea about God that has to do with your consciousness. And this is why there's such a strong dividing line, because depending on where you are in consciousness, you're going to have a certain concept or an idea of God you're going to carry with you. There are 4 so-called kingdoms that we talk about when we're talking about what you believe about God. The first kingdom is people believe in a God that does something to you. Okay, so in my example, when I was a kid, I told you when I was young, I used to get picked on and pushed around. I was a victim. I was bullied. So I acted like a victim. I lived like a victim. I didn't stand up and fight. I would run away. I prayed like a victim. Oh God, make something happen to him. He's bad, you know? That's the God that I was praying to, okay? And you guys laugh, but it's the truth. The majority of the Western world believes in a God that does something to you. The people who sat down and decided what books are going to be in the Bible had an image of God like that, because they came from the Jewish religion, and the Jewish religion came from a God that does something to you. They feared God. So of course, things that weren't consistent with that didn't belong in the Bible. That's not the consciousness that we have today, but that was the consciousness then, and the consciousness of most of the world. As you move up in consciousness and you expand your idea of God, the next level, the next kingdom, is a God who does something for you. There are examples of that in the Old Testament where God sent manna from heaven and all, but in general, when we think about God doing something for you, it seems like it was something instantaneous. We need something and suddenly it appears. We're sitting there saying, I wonder what's going to happen, and we get the phone call from someone. We call it a coincidence, but in New Thought, we say there's no such thing as a coincidence. A coincidence is defined as God working a miracle anonymously. That's the God that does something for you. As we grow in knowledge of God and our relationship with God expands, so does our understanding, and we move, or can move, to the third kingdom. The third kingdom, now we've gone from a God that does something to you, God that does something for you. The next level is God that does something through you. That's what we mean when we say going within. There's divine guidance. You have this feeling. You can't necessarily put your finger on it, but your gut is telling you, I should be here, or I should do this, or I get joy out of that. You are guided by that small voice, such as what we do in ministry. Ministry guided us when we came down here to work with children who have lost loved ones. We formed a nonprofit called Kids Grief Relief. Nobody would ever choose to work with grief, but it was just placed in front of us. The opportunity came to us, and we followed it. That's God working through us. It wasn't the image that we had. We had a totally different image of what we wanted to do, but Spirit gave us that opportunity, and we stepped into it. That's God working through you. It's a different idea of God, and it represents a higher consciousness than the God that would do something to me. The fourth kingdom, the highest level, is God as you, or what I like to call Christ consciousness. That was Jesus. Okay? Jesus knew exactly who he was, and he said to all of them, truly, I tell all of you emphatically, the one who believes in me will also do what I'm doing and will do even greater things than these. He was saying that he was an example to all of us of what was possible for human beings. We can move in our idea of God. Now, the people he was dealing with at that time, he was trying to bring from the first kingdom to the second. He was trying to bring them from an idea of God who did something to you to a God who did something for you. That's why he kept talking about love rather than punishment or sin. And I ask you, if you really had to go to get some advice, you go to an expert. So who had a clearer relationship to God than Jesus? No one. Who had a clearer understanding of God than Jesus? What do Jesus' actions tell us about God? Did Jesus fear God? Did he worry about sin? No. He was one with the Father, and he would go within at times just to be able to get centered and know the truth. That's why he's called the great example, or the master teacher. He didn't come to be put up on a pedestal. He wasn't there as God's only son and the rest of us are sinners. He came to show us what was possible when we raise our vibration, raise our consciousness, raise our beliefs about God. I believe that the idea of God follows human consciousness from fear to love. And the highest consciousness that you can have of love is this Christ consciousness, which is all loving, unconditional, and equal to all. Now, the first step that we have to take in trying to get there is to really ask ourselves, well, I can believe what you say, Pete, but I don't always live that way. So what is it that gets in the way of us living that type of life? We can mentally adjust and say, yes, I can believe God is all loving, but then am I all loving? Do I love everyone? Do I love everyone equally and unconditionally? What gets in the way of that? What about my enemies? People I don't like. I just don't like them. Okay, am I supposed to love them anyway? Huh? I mean, come on. What about bad people? You know, in a couple of weeks we'll be celebrating the anniversary of the Charleston 9. What about Dylan Roof? Am I supposed to love Dylan Roof? Does God love Dylan Roof the same as he loves me? Is Dylan going to get punished and I'm not? All my good deeds, and then look at him going out and shooting and killing people? What about when my buttons get pressed with something far less severe than Dylan Roof, like members of my family? I'll share with you a story. My dad, over the years, my parents were down in Florida. I was living in New Jersey. And I have 3 sisters. One was in Maine, one in Massachusetts, one in North Carolina. My parents would go from Florida to Massachusetts, passing through New Jersey, every year, and they would be going up to go see their grandchildren up in Massachusetts. And then they would leave as it got cold and see their grandchildren down in North Carolina and go to Florida. There I was in New Jersey. They didn't stop to see me. No. Well, okay, so I can overlook some of that, okay? But then, so my dad is now in Florida, and I would call him every so often to see how he's doing, but he never calls me. He doesn't bother calling me. Oh, sure, he's concerned about his grandkids, but his own son, his only son, okay, does he call me? No, okay? I mean, why should I be the one always calling him? If he loved me, he would call me. So which kingdom am I in? Am I a victim? Is somebody doing something to me? Yeah, that's who I am. So there's an example where something is getting in the way of me loving my own dad unconditionally. Now, if I can't love my own dad unconditionally, after all he did, okay, how the heck am I going to go out in the world and love everybody else? Okay? So it's not difficult to find. And believe me, does anybody here believe that there isn't any situation in the world that can't be improved by bringing more love to it? I mean, come on. Is there anyone here who wouldn't want more love? Anybody? Okay. I mean, it's obvious. We have to overcome our stinginess. I mean, if you think about it, Ike talked about how he was so grateful that he did not believe anymore in a stingy God. He talked about a God of abundance. a God who loved him and was more than willing to give, and the only thing getting in the way was himself or ourselves. It's the same thing. There's nothing stopping us from giving more love to people. There's nothing that's stopping us from being out there and being more like Jesus, except ourselves. What if you and I were expressions of God, and our purpose in life was to express as much God as possible? What if that was our guideline? Our guideline for living. You know, people talk about what the meaning of life is. What if the meaning of life was, my role is to express as much God as possible? And since each of us is unique, we can uniquely express God's beauty, wonder, splendor, and magnificence. But first of all, we have to express God's love. God's... Is that a hint? Is that a hint? I guess I'll be wrapping up. So the challenge for all of us is to look in what areas in our life is love not present and why. And just to give you some help, I'll give you a few ideas. Does anybody here have any fear or anger that's blocking the possibility of love? Is anyone hanging on to an old grudge or hurt like I was or am? Anybody convinced that you're right and they're wrong and you want them to admit it? Anybody have issues with the fact that they don't believe or behave the way we do? Does anybody find that they're judging somebody as bad or wrong? Or actually judging somebody better or worse than we are in withholding love? Inner divinity is within everyone. Our job is to see it. Our job is to express as much God as possible. That's why we call Jesus the great example. We bring that unconditional love, and any place that it's not present is an area for us to heal. People in our lives who press our buttons, get us upset, take us away from that cause us to sin, are our greatest gift, because they show us where we need healing. Because as we heal, we grow in our consciousness of God and get closer to the Christ consciousness. So I'm going to close with a statement from John. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we are to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. This is how love is made complete amongst us, so that we will have confidence. In this world we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. Kingdom 1, by the way. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he loved us first. Whoever claims to love God, yet hates his brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister, whom they have seen, cannot love God, whom they have not seen. And he gave us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister.